I had just turned 32 when I bought my house. Not our house, my house. I want to be clear about that from the beginning because it matters later, it matters a lot, and I spent too many years letting that distinction get blurry in my own head. It was a 2-bedroom craftsman in a quiet neighborhood outside of Columbus, Ohio. I paid the down payment myself, 12%. I had been saving since I was 26, transferring money every single payday into an account I didn't touch, didn't look at more than once a month, didn't talk about at dinner parties. I bought my groceries at Aldi. I drove a 2014 Honda Civic with a cracked dashboard and a passenger side window that stuck in cold weather. I did not take vacations. I did not upgrade my phone until it stopped turning on. I earned that down payment the way you earn something when nobody's watching. Quietly, stubbornly, one unremarkable week at a time. My name is on the deed. Only my name. I met my husband. I'll call him my husband, even though he's my ex-husband now, because that's what he was for 6 years, at a friend's birthday party when I was 28. He was funny. He was easy to be around. On our third date, he told me he thought I was the most capable person he'd ever met, and I remember thinking that was such a strange thing to say to someone you were trying to impress. Most men would say beautiful or interesting or fun. He said capable. I should have filed that away somewhere more accessible. His mother, I'll call her Marlene. I met about 2 months into dating. She lived 40 minutes away in Westerville in a house her son helped pay the mortgage on, which I did not know until after we were engaged. She had sharp eyes and a way of hugging you that felt more like inventory than affection. She would hold your arms and look at you like she was trying to find something to catalog. The first time she met me, she asked where I worked, what my salary range was, whether I rented or owned, and what my parents did for a living. All within the first 20 minutes, all delivered in this warm, curious voice like she was just making conversation. I answered everything. I don't know why. I think I wanted her to like me. My husband thought this was normal. He thought all of it was normal. He grew up in that house, and he loved her. And she was the kind of woman who made love feel like obligation, and obligation feel like love, and he couldn't always tell the difference between the two. I understand that now. I didn't then. We got married the fall after I bought the house. It made sense, practically. The house was already there, already mine, and we moved into it together and split the monthly bills down the middle. I paid the mortgage from my own account. My name on the loan, my credit, my history. My husband contributed to utilities and groceries. It worked fine. It was fair. I thought we had the same understanding of what that meant. Marlene, I would learn, had a very different understanding. The first time I noticed something was wrong, really wrong, not just Marlene being Marlene wrong, was about 2 years into the marriage. We were at her house for Sunday dinner, which happened every few weeks, whether I felt like it or not. She pulled me aside in the kitchen while my husband was in the backyard with his uncle, and she asked me very casually whether I had considered adding my husband's name to the deed. I told her we hadn't really discussed it. She nodded slowly, like I had said something she already knew. She said, "He helps with the bills, though. That's something." I said yes. We split things fairly. She said, "It just seems like if something happened to you, he'd be in a difficult position. Don't you think? He's been living there for 2 years." I told her I had a will and that we'd spoken to an estate attorney when we got married. She said, of course, and went back to stirring her pot of chili, and I went outside and stood in the cold for a few minutes and tried to name what I was feeling. I couldn't quite. I filed it away under uncomfortable but probably nothing and didn't take it out again for another year. The questions kept coming. Not always from Marlene directly, sometimes from my husband, in ways that felt like they'd been workshopped somewhere else first. Had I thought about refinancing? Who was my financial advisor? Was my investment account just in my name, or had I looked into joint options? He asked these questions with the same casual tone she used, like he was just curious, like it was just conversation. I started to feel like I was being mapped. I didn't say that out loud. I should have. The thing about gaslighting is that it doesn't feel like gaslighting while it's happening. It feels like you're the unreasonable one. It feels like everyone around you has a perfectly rational explanation for everything. And the only person who senses something dark underneath is you. And that maybe says something about you, about your trust issues, your anxiety, your inability to just relax and let people love you. My husband was very good at this. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't call me names. He just quietly, consistently made me feel like my instincts were a personal failing. About 3 years into our marriage, I got a significant promotion at work, senior project manager at a mid-size infrastructure firm, the kind of job that comes with a real salary increase, a new title, and suddenly people treating you differently in meetings. I was proud of it. I had worked for it. My husband took me to dinner and said he was proud of me too, and a week later, Marlene called to congratulate me and then, before we hung up, asked if this meant I'd be looking to invest more aggressively and whether I had someone helping me think through my options. I told her I had a financial advisor. Yes. She said, "Oh, who do you use? My friend Cheryl uses someone very good." I gave a vague non-answer. She didn't push. She just got very quiet in the way she did when she was filing information away for later. I started keeping notes after that. Not formal notes, just a running document on my personal laptop, locked, that I added to whenever something felt off. It sounds paranoid. Looking back, it wasn't paranoid enough. The thing that broke everything open wasn't dramatic. It was a Tuesday in March. Mid-afternoon, I had taken a half-day for a dentist appointment and came home 2 hours earlier than usual. My husband's car wasn't in the driveway, but there was a manila folder on the kitchen counter that hadn't been there that morning. I have a very particular relationship with my kitchen counter. I'm a clean counter person almost compulsively, and I knew immediately that it had been placed there deliberately or left there by accident, but either way it didn't belong. I opened it. Inside was a printout of something called a quitclaim deed. My name was on it, my husband's name was on it, Marlene's name was on it, in a section I had to read 3 times to understand, listed as a beneficiary in a trust structure I had never heard of, had never agreed to, had never signed. The document wasn't executed. There were no signatures. But it was drafted. Someone had paid a lawyer to draft it. The address at the top was my house. I stood at my kitchen counter for a long time. I did not call my husband. I did not call my husband. I did not call my husband. I took photographs of every page with my phone, put the folder back exactly where it was, and sat down at my kitchen table and did something I am still proud of. I did not panic. I breathed. I thought about what I actually knew versus what I was inferring, and then I opened my laptop and called my own attorney. Her name was Catherine. I had used her for the original home purchase and kept her number in my phone because I'm the kind of person who keeps that kind of number. She answered on the second ring. I told her what I'd found. She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "Don't sign anything, don't mention anything, come in Thursday morning." I said okay. Then I closed the laptop and started dinner, and when my husband came home I said hello and asked how his day was. And he said fine and asked about the dentist, and I said just a cleaning, nothing major, and we ate pasta and watched television, and I did not say a word. That was the hardest thing I've ever done. Over the next several weeks I met with Catherine twice. She reviewed the folder, I brought her the photos, and she explained that what I was looking at was an attempt to restructure ownership of the house through a trust in a way that would, over time, erode my sole ownership and create grounds for Marlene to have a claim on the property if my husband and I divorced or if I died. It was not a casual thing. Someone had thought about this carefully. Someone had thought about this carefully. Someone had paid for it. Catherine also told me that my husband's name being on the loan was separate from the deed. He wasn't on the deed, had never been, but that the draft document was attempting to change that. She told me to watch my credit, watch my accounts, document everything, and make no sudden moves. I went home and started doing exactly that. I changed passwords. I opened a separate checking account at a different bank that my husband didn't know about and began routing a portion of my direct deposit there. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would show up as suspicious, just a quiet reserve. I updated my will with Catherine. I went through every financial account and made sure the beneficiaries and access permissions were what I actually intended them to be. And then I waited. It was another 3 months before I made any decisions about my marriage. I want to be honest about this. I wasn't just gathering evidence during those months. I was also grieving. I had loved this person, or I had loved who I thought he was, which is a different thing, and the gap between those two versions of him had been widening for years, and I just hadn't been willing to look directly at it. I spent a lot of evenings in my car in the driveway, just sitting, listening to the engine tick, letting myself feel sad about it before I went inside and made dinner and acted like everything was fine. My best friend, I'll call her by the name everyone uses for her, which is Tess. Tess knew. Not everything, but enough. She's the person I call when I'm not sure I'm being reasonable, because she will tell me very directly if I'm not. When I finally told her the full picture, sitting on her back porch with a glass of wine I barely touched, she listened without interrupting, and then she said, "How long have you known?" I said, "A few months." She said, "And what are you waiting for?" I said I wasn't sure. She said, "You're waiting for it to not be true." She was right. That's exactly what I was waiting for. I filed in September. My husband was served at his office, which Catherine recommended because it ensured he received the papers in a controlled environment and reduced the risk of a volatile reaction at home. That evening he came home very quiet and very pale, and we sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd stood 2 hours in March and decided not to panic. And he asked me if there was anything that would change my mind. I asked him who drafted the quitclaim document. He looked at his hands. He said his mother had suggested it. He said he hadn't thought it would actually go anywhere. He said she had a friend who was an attorney and it was just a conversation that turned into a document and he should have told me. I said yes, he should have. He moved out 2 weeks later. The divorce took about 4 months, which Catherine told me was relatively fast, given we had no children and the house was unambiguously mine. There was nothing to divide that required a fight. That was the part I had been careful about. He got his personal belongings, his car, a portion of our joint savings account that we split evenly according to what each of us had contributed. It was clean. It was fair. I made sure of that. I thought that was the end of it. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, on a Saturday afternoon, I got a text from my sister-in-law, my ex-sister-in-law, technically, though she had always been kind to me and I hadn't cut contact with her. That simply said, "Marlene is throwing a party tonight. I thought you should know. She's introducing someone." I stared at the text for a long time. He had been seeing someone. Of course he had. I didn't know when it had started. I'm not sure I wanted to know, but Marlene was throwing a party in her house, with her side of the family, with the aunts and cousins and neighbors who had known me for 6 years, to introduce this woman to everyone. 3 weeks after my divorce was finalized, I put my phone face down on the counter and went for a long walk. When I came back, there was a voicemail from Marlene. I almost didn't listen to it. I stood in my kitchen with my phone in my hand for probably 90 seconds, just staring at the screen, before I pressed play. Her voice was bright and a little breathless, the way it got when she was performing pleasantness. She said she was having a small gathering that evening, just family, and she wanted to let me know. She said that, wanted to let me know, like she was doing me a courtesy, that she had already sent a bottle of wine to my address as a thank you. She said she'd arranged for a small catering order and used the credit card on file, the one I had added to a shared account when we were married for household emergencies. I pulled up the shared account. She had charged $462 to it, for a party celebrating my ex-husband's new relationship. 3 weeks after my divorce, I sat down on the floor of my kitchen, not because my legs gave out, just because the floor felt like the right place to be for a moment. I sat there and I thought about 6 years. I thought about Sunday dinners and the way she held my arms when she hugged me and the questions about my salary and my mortgage and my deed and my accounts and my future. I thought about the manila folder on the counter. I thought about Catherine's office and the cold drive home and the evenings in my driveway. And then I got up, went to my laptop and called the credit card company. I had already removed Marlene from the account. I had done it as part of the quiet financial cleanup after I filed, but there had been a processing delay I hadn't followed up on, and the old card number was apparently still showing as active in her records. The charge had gone through. I disputed it. All of it. And then I called the card company back and had the account number changed entirely and confirmed there were no other authorized users anywhere in the system. Then I called Catherine and asked about options for recovering the charged amount given the circumstances. She said I had a reasonable case and walked me through what that would look like if I wanted to pursue it. I said I'd think about it. That night I didn't think about it. I ate leftovers and watched a movie I've seen 6 or 7 times and went to bed early. I slept well, which surprised me a little. The call came Sunday morning at 8:47. I know the exact time because I was still in bed, half asleep, and I looked at my phone before I answered. The number was Marlene's. I answered because I had been waiting for it, in a low, certain part of myself, since the moment I saw the charge the night before. Her voice, when I picked up, was very different from the voicemail. It was tight. Clipped. She was trying to stay controlled, but there was something fraying underneath it. She said, "I need to ask you something." I said, "Okay." She said, "I got a call from the restaurant this morning. Apparently the card didn't go through last night. There must be some kind of error. Can you look into it?" I let a beat pass. "Just one?" Then I said it wasn't an error. She was quiet. I said the account was updated. You're not an authorized user anymore. That happened a while ago, actually. I should have double-checked the processing, but I didn't. Either way, it's done now. She said, "But the dinner, the catering, the wine, I thought you still had the account." I said, "I can see why you thought that, but the divorce was finalized 3 weeks ago. Any shared accounts were part of the separation process. I'm a little surprised you expected otherwise." Another pause. Longer this time. Then she said, in a different voice, lower, almost conspiratorial, "Clara, I think we got off on the wrong foot. I've always wanted what was best for my son, and you were." I said, "Marlene, I need to stop you there." She stopped. I said, "I'm going to need you to contact the restaurant directly about the bill. That's between you and them now. I'm not going to be able to help with that." She started to say something else. I said I had to go, and I ended the call. I sat there for a moment after I hung up. Outside, it was still early enough that the neighborhood was quiet. Someone's dog was barking 2 streets over. The light through my bedroom window was that particular pale gold of early October when the angle changes and everything looks a little cleaner than it is. My house. My name on the deed. My account. I didn't feel triumphant, exactly. Triumph is loud, and I felt very quiet. What I felt was something closer to settled. Like a drawer that had been slightly out of alignment for years had finally slid back into its track and caught. The feeling of things being, finally, exactly what they appeared to be. Tess came over that afternoon and I told her everything over coffee at my kitchen table. She listened the same way she always does, with her chin in her hand, and when I finished she said, "So what do you want to do now?" I looked around my kitchen. At the counter I keep clean. At the window over the sink that looks out at the backyard. At the walls I had painted myself the first summer, a color called accessible beige, which I thought was the most accurately named paint color I had ever encountered. I said, "I want to repaint the living room. I've been thinking about it for 2 years. Tess laughed. I laughed too. And that was it. That was really honestly all of it. Not every ending has to be dramatic to be complete. Some endings are just a Sunday morning phone call, and then coffee with your best friend, and then deciding it's finally time to repaint. My name is still the only one on the deed. I planted tulip bulbs in the backyard the following weekend. They came up in April, orange and red, and I stood at the back window with my coffee and watched them for a long time. I had learned a few things, not the way you learn something in a class, more the way you learn something because it happened to you and it changed the shape of your interior a little, permanently, in a way you carry forward. I had learned that being capable, the way my husband had once said I was, is not always a compliment. Sometimes it means people decide your capability is a resource they're entitled to if they can just find the right approach. I had learned that quiet is its own kind of power, that you don't have to confront everything loudly, that sometimes the most devastating thing you can do is simply close an account and go to bed. And I had learned, this one took the longest, that the house was never really what they were after. The house was just the thing you could point to on a document. What they actually wanted was harder to name, the sense that they had a claim on me, on my future, on the story of what my life was going to be. They never had that. They just thought they did for a while. The tulips bloomed for about 3 weeks. When they faded, I cut them back and marked the spots so I'd remember where they were in the fall. I'll plant more bulbs next October. Different colors this time. Maybe something that will come back every year. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this ended. Not in a dramatic way. I'm not someone who replays things obsessively, but in the quiet, practical way you think about a road you almost took wrong and didn't. You don't dwell on it. You just get a little more careful at that kind of intersection going forward. Marlene didn't set out to be villainous, I don't think. That's the part that took me longest to sit with. She set out to protect her son, which is a thing mothers do, and somewhere along the way, protecting him became synonymous with controlling everything around him. And controlling everything around him meant treating my house, my accounts, my future as variables she was entitled to manage. The entitlement didn't come from nowhere. It came from years of it working. He let her ask questions he should have deflected. He let her draft documents he should have never handed to a lawyer. He let things go further than they should have because saying no to her cost him something and saying nothing cost him nothing until it cost him everything. That's the cause and effect part. Not punishment, just consequence. The natural result of a long series of choices arriving on schedule. What I keep coming back to, honestly, is the folder on the counter, that Tuesday in March. Because the person I was 5 years earlier, younger, more anxious to be liked, more willing to explain away discomfort, that person might have put the folder back and never mentioned it, might have filed it under uncomfortable but probably nothing, and kept making Sunday dinners and answering questions about her mortgage. I know that person. I was that person for longer than I'd like to admit. The difference, by the time I found that folder, was that I had spent years quietly building something they couldn't see. Not just the savings account, not just the house, though those mattered practically enormously. I mean the internal thing, the part of you that knows what you know and doesn't need someone else to confirm it before you act on it. Tess called it instinct. Catherine called it documentation. I think it's simpler than either word. It's just deciding that your own perception of a situation is worth taking seriously. That's the thing nobody tells you about intelligence used well. It's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being honest with yourself about what you're actually seeing, even when it's inconvenient, even when the easier thing would be to look somewhere else. Marlene was intelligent. My ex-husband was intelligent. They just used it in service of a story they'd already decided was true, and when reality stopped matching that story, they didn't adjust. They pushed harder. That never works for long. And the resilience part, that's the tulip bulbs, I think. Planting things in fall that won't show up until spring. Doing the quiet work without any guarantee of what you'll get for it. I drove a cracked dashboard Civic for years so I could own something real. I changed my passwords and opened a new account and met with my attorney and said nothing at Sunday dinners, and none of that felt heroic while I was doing it. It just felt like paying attention, like taking care of what was mine. The call from Marlene that Sunday morning lasted maybe 4 minutes. She expected panic. She expected apology. She expected that the old dynamic would hold, that I would scramble to fix something for her because that's what I had always done. I didn't panic. I wasn't sorry. And the dynamic, like the account, was already closed. The tulips came up orange and red that April. I stood at the window with my coffee and I thought, this is what it feels like when things are exactly what they appear to be. No one else's name on anything. No folder on the counter. Just a house and a yard and a life that belonged to me completely all the way down.